Hey everybody, I'm Amanda with DevExpress and welcome to 19.2 launch week. And today's webinar is what's new in WPF with a little bit of Xamarin and UWP thrown in at the end. It's presented by DevExpress Technical Evangelist Paul Usher and DevExpress CTO Julian Bucknall. In today's session, Julian and Paul will detail the features we expect to ship for WPF. This session is being recorded and it will be made available on our DevExpress YouTube channel later today. We will also do a live Q&A at the end of this presentation. Just type your questions in the GoToWebinar control panel at any time throughout the broadcast. All right, thank you so much for joining us. I will now hand things over to Julian and Paul.
Thank you, Amanda, and welcome everybody. This is Julian, and I believe, well, I hope, Paul is also on the line. Hello, Paul.
Good morning. As long as I find the unmute button in time, I'm definitely here.
Oh, we are professionals. Let's put it like that. And yes, we're going to be talking about what's new in version 19.2 for WPF, and there may be a little bit of other stuff at the end. So do stick around. Well, let's just quickly kick off straight away because there's a lot to get through, so we don't want to mess around. WPF, new controls and features and enhancements. There's an awful lot across the board. We've been extremely busy, or rather the team has been extremely busy. So this is the kind of controls that I'm going to be talking about. And obviously, the very first thing to talk about is .NET Core 3.0. And we had a good session about this on Monday with WinForms with WPF. Obviously, there's an announcement to make that our product line officially supports .NET Core 3.0, and WPF also supports Entity Framework Core 3.0. We've been extensively testing this as Microsoft have been releasing their previews, and we can confirm that our WPF suite, our controls within that suite, are totally ready for production use. You can use them now in or with version 19.2 with .NET Core 3.0. And of course, I hope everybody listening in today already knows that we have released version 19.2. Our recommendation, Paul, is what?
Or download and use it.
Download and use it in your new projects. Yes, you can try converting your legacy projects that use WPF controls to use .NET Core 3.0. Please reserve some time for that. Our recommendation is basically just use it for new projects. In theory, you can convert an existing project to use .NET Core 3 with our WPF controls. Not everything in .NET Framework is actually part of .NET Core 3, so just be warned. But obviously, if you start anew, you have much more success. With regard, though, to Visual Studio, there's some good news and what I might say not so good news. Firstly, NuGet is going to be used to install our WPF controls inside Visual Studio. So that makes sure that the controls are available within the toolbox. We have a special installer for NuGet that does that for you, so that's part of the good news. We have a small selection, I think there's just 3 at the moment, new app templates for your WPF new projects, and we'll be adding more templates as time goes on, most probably in minor versions, so you don't have to wait till the first major release of next year. And moving on to some not quite so good news, our most popular Visual Studio extensions for WPF, which are the Project Converter and the Assembly Deployment Tool, are not available for .NET Core. So already, if you're going to try a legacy app, the Project Converter will not work for you. So be warned. You can just open your current project in Visual Studio and then change the target to .NET Core 3.0 and hope for the best. Start recompiling. But as I say, our recommendation is new projects only. The other slight bad news, shall we say, is the Visual Studio Designer for .NET Core has changed and is changing drastically, basically as we speak. Microsoft have put out a preview, or maybe several previews by now, but things are still evolving rapidly on that front. With WinForms, for example, it just doesn't work. WPF, most of our designer extensions do not work. And we're obviously monitoring what the Visual Studio team are doing at Microsoft, and we'll be helping them out in a sense and providing as many designer extensions as we can as quickly as we can. Anyway, that's .NET Core 3 support. Do use it on your new projects and see what you feel. Let's jump straight into some interesting demos. So let me just bring up the WPF demo. Oop, there we go. Sorry, I'd lost it for the moment. WPF demo application. This gets installed when you install our WPF suite or Universal or DXperience. First thing I'm going to do is obviously quickly chat about the data grid, and because we're well known for our grids. The first up is our new feature, the conditional formatting filters. So if I bring up the conditional formatting, let's use this. There we are, conditional formatting. If I bring up this particular demo, we've seen this before. This is basically a way for you to define a certain set of rules for a column that display some extra information via the colors and extra icons, or maybe the spark lines to go along with the information that's already part of that column. So here we are, typical formatting, conditional formatting type thing. And now I'm just going to filter the profit column here. And under filter rules, there's a new option called format condition filters. So imagine you using some conditional formatting rules. You can now use those rules as filters. So both the filter editor and the Excel style drop-down filter can display these extra rules. So here we are. We have basically 4 formatting options here on this particular column. Profit less than 0, greater than 0 in the top 5, or the customer satisfaction in the bottom. So let me select all of those rows where we had no profit whatsoever, a loss in fact. There are 7. We automatically calculate that for you. And as I click that, as you can see, the filter gets applied according to the format condition. So the other thing that's interesting while we're here is the data grid and tree lists also allow you to apply the following data analysis filters in this drop-down. So we have the new top N, bottom N, obviously you define what N is. Above average, below average, whether they're unique, duplicate. So the data analysis filters are also there as part of the new filter enhancements. So another thing while we're here is the data grid and tree list now calculates summary values for selected rows or cells. So at the moment we're showing those rows which have no profit, as we have here. And down here what we have is this extra summary value row, if you like, which displays summary values for, oh, I should ignore that for the moment. So the summary values along the bottom show the average of this particular column, the sum of these particular ones. So it's just doing this for the selected cells in this particular filter. So the average for those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cells, rows is 117, some is minus 77 for those, and so on and so forth. So that's a new feature for selections. The search panel, let's get rid of this particular filter for the moment. The search panel now comes with some new parse modes, P-A-R-S-E, not P-A-S-S, parsing. The one we're used to is an exact match. As I type in something here, we get, if you like, the exact match. We're only showing those states which have the word new in them. But now we have a couple of other new parse modes. The one is using the or condition, and the other one is the and condition. The or condition basically says it's going to look at the words in the search query and it's going to combine with the or operator. The and condition is the words in the search query are combined with the and operator. So if I show you this, so here we are showing all the states with the word new in it, and if I type the word Y, the letter Y, it's also going to show me suddenly Kentucky and Wyoming because they both have Y's in them. In other words, you can spot immediately this particular search panel is using the or condition. It's saying find those records with the word new or the quote word Y, or this particular search term Y. If I type in an O afterwards, we'll just see that it's including Wyoming. So that's using the or condition on that particular search panel. So the other main thing about the data grid and tree list is the Excel style drop-down filter is now the default for data grids and tree lists. Oh, another great feature for the data grid. Let me just jump over to down here, the editing section here, the edit entire row feature. So it's a new edit mode for the grid and the tree list. Basically, given a particular row, as you start editing it, all I did was double click on that particular column, or that particular cell I should say, it switches the grid into an edit entire row mode. And what's actually happened here is the rest of the grid has become disabled. I can't click anywhere outside here. And so I'm editing this row, and we're now showing an update and cancel button. And in this mode, this row edit mode, entire row edit mode, your changes are not posted to the data source until you click update. So let's change their name, Samuel. If I click update, it will update the data source. But until then, nothing has changed on the data source side. But I can't get out of this entire row edit unless I press cancel or I press update. So there we are. And here's an example with cancel. We switch back into the full grid mode, if you like. So that's the edit entire row feature. Enough for the grid and the tree list. Let me jump now into charting. We showed this particular, or a couple of these new features on Monday and Tuesday, actually. The very first one is a new chart type called the waterfall chart. Basically helps you visualize positive and negative changes to values, or how values are changing across a given time period. Here we have the global carbon balance chart from 1989 over to 2018. We're showing some major points here where something major happened, essentially. And if the carbon balance increases, we decided that we ought to show those in red. And if it decreases, we decide to show those in green. So we get this kind of nice kind of waterfall effect. Your eye can visualize what's happening, what's good, what's bad, and the various major milestones in this particular chart are shown in a gray color here. So it's a better visualization, if you like, than say a line chart or just a simple bar chart. We're seeing a flow of changes going up or coming down. So that's the waterfall. Under detailed data here, we're showing essentially a stack bar with each individual data point or time. And we can see the waterfall still as part of this, but we see it's not just a stacked bar chart at this point, but they are stacked bars within a waterfall chart. The next one is the box plot. Great if you're doing some kind of statistical analysis of your data. It basically helps you visualize distribution of your statistical data using summary values. And the summary values we're automatically calculating here are the minimum, maximum, the first quartile. So here we are on this particular chart. We have the minimum down here, the maximum up here, the first quartile, as the third quartile, the median, which is the line in the middle, and the X marks the mean. If you have values outside the minimum, maximum, we show those as outliers, as a dot, essentially. It's a way of visualizing, statistical data, from your experiments and all that kind of stuff. The box plot chart. We've added scroll bar annotations, so you can direct your users to important information within the XY diagram. Annotations are there for strips, constant lines, pane annotations, serious point annotations, and custom axis labels. And we're also providing full support for time span scales. Your time span data can be plotted as is, or you can aggregate them through some custom mode, and we can aggregate or display that time span data to an x-axis, y-axis, and so on. And with every release, we've improved performance across the board, especially this time with real-time data updates. Moving right along, the diagram control. We showed this as part of the WinForms webinar on Monday. So let's quickly show you the changes in the diagram control for WPF. Here we are, here's the demo. The very first thing is the org chart layout algorithm. So you've got an org chart for a company or a company department or something like that. Let me just increase the visualization here. There we go. Come on, wake up. There we are. So what we're showing here is, typical looking org chart. And what we have is a new layout algorithm. And basically the shapes at the upper levels, so we have upper levels here, they are arranged by this algorithm using a tree graph algorithm. In other words, the one at the top has, it's overlooking these three persons, and each of these has, somebody there supervising. But then you specify the number of levels you want this particular tree look. And I joked with Paul earlier on that in computing terms, a tree is always shown upside down. So there's the root, and these are the branches, and these are the leaves. But the lower levels of the hierarchy, rather than continuing this tree algorithm, we use a tip-over tree layout algorithm. So we then flip to this vertical view of the hierarchy. So overall, what happens is essentially it makes sure that you don't create these huge, wide org charts as you go down the hierarchy. Because imagine this team leader has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 programmers underneath. Imagine that as a tree algorithm. You'd have your org chart extending way out here across and off the screen. In fact, while I'm here, so that's the automatic layout. While I'm here, let me just show you the other organization chart that we have here, just because it's big. And the new feature here that I'm going to show is the fit to page feature for printing. So you can now scale a diagram and fit it onto a single page or a fixed number of pages when printing. So let me hit the print preview here. So here we are, I'm user and I just want it all on one page. At the moment we're doing a best fit algorithm. So instead I'm going to scale it and I'm just going to try and squeeze it all on one page horizontally. So let me just do that. And there we are. So this is the new fit to page feature of the diagram control, the ability to scale a diagram and fit it to as many pages across as you want. So if let's go for 4 pages horizontally. Let's see what it looks like. There we go. 4 pages horizontally, and obviously 1, 2, 3, 4 down, or maybe just 3. But this is a new way to help your users print to either PDF or whatever to get this org chart or whatever diagram we're talking about here to fit on as many pages as they particularly want. Next up, connector labels. Let me jump over to the connectors demo. What we've done here is, we all know what connectors are. Essentially, with this release, you can add up to 4 text labels to your connectors. You can add 2 labels at the start and 2 labels at the end. So here we just have 1 label at start and end, and here we have 1 label at the start and 2 at the end. So it's just a way of getting more information onto your chart, or your diagram, I should say, through the connectors. So that's it for the diagram control. Let me switch back now and then talk about a new, it's more of an API than anything than a control per se. It's our new badges API. So let me open that up. And so what's a badge, you say? Well, basically a badge is some kind of information that you want to display, you want to draw your user's attention to as a little blob of information. So here we have badges. So there's a badge here which says new. There's a badge here which says 6 in red, and a badge here which says 45 in blue. This is a nice badge, management department. There's a badge here. Oh, there's 2 urgent ones here. And another badge down here saying 2. So these, another one here. So these basically give you a way of drawing your users' attention to something important, something they should be paying attention to. You basically can say, obviously, what's inside the badge, the content of the badge, its position, and you can draw it over any control or UI element at all. So the position is not, it has to be at the top left of this particular UI element. No. Over anything, and you basically define its appearance, so the colors and the font and all that kind of stuff. Badges, great new feature. While we're talking about data editors, because that's part of our data editors, as it were, I'm going to look at the time picker control. It's a new control that we have for defining times, essentially. So the time picker, here it is on its own. So instead of thinking, oh, I've got to press 5, and I can actually use the up-down arrow keys. So 520 and tab. Oh, that goes to the wrong place. And you can change the time very easily with the arrow keys rather than to type in the number. We've added it to the calendar. as part of the date edit. So if you're requiring a date edit with time, here it is again. So I can easily change the time. It's okay. And here's the date edit with the just basically the time picker on its own. And notice if I even use the up-down keys here rather than here, it'll change the clock face. So time picker control. As we're here, let's jump over to text edit. Yes, we've had a text edit in forever, but the thing I want to display here or show here is the ability to show a read-only control as being visually distinguished from a non-read-only control. So this control, yeah, I can click on it, but I can't actually edit it. But it looks different from the other controls where I can edit something. So here I'm typing in numbers, fine. Here I'm in read-only mode, and now I'm not in read-only mode, and I can type something in. The feature is available in using certain themes, the Office 2016 SE, Office 2019, and Visual Studio 2017 themes will show you this visually different look and feel to read-only fields. Gantt control. Here we've added, let me just zoom in a little bit, there we go. We've added strip lines to the Gantt control. We have various strip lines. A single strip line marks a particular date and time. Strip line rule, so same thing, but you can have a recurrence factor according to a specific rule. And what I'm showing here is that particular version. So here's a strip line, and here's another strip line. But notice it's late on Wednesday. So I've specified the rule to be a particular time on Wednesday, and we're showing the strip lines. So say the strip lines here are late on Wednesday. I don't know what time, but late on Wednesday, we're showing a strip line. Presumably it's some kind of, meeting or something like that we're going to talk about progress or whatever it happens to be. Another strip line is the current date time strip line, which shows the current date time, and basically it's updated on the screen as time goes by. Another one to view is the new critical path feature, which shows, well, basically the Gantt control can calculate and highlight the critical path through the Gantt area, the charting area, so we can see the critical path here, what needs to be done and what has to be done before anything else happens and all the rest of it. It'll automatically update as you move tasks or change task duration somewhere, so the critical path feature auto-calculated. Thank you, Gantt control, for crashing. Let's jump over to mapping. This one was a fun one. New feature is the heat map feature. We showed this in the WinForms version on Monday. And what this is, it's a new visualization showing a kind of heat map. Here we're showing seismic incidents around the world, the density of them, whether they happen regularly or not. So you can change the following. Well, obviously you can zoom in, and let's go over to California to show, obviously, the amount of seismic activity and all that kind of stuff. The heat map, Paul being in Australia can tell me what the name of this one is. I mean, this is like the nutty one.
The Pacific Rim of Fire.
The Pacific Rim of Fire makes you want to go to the Pacific Rim and have a look at it. Basically, you can change the gradient that you're using. So here we're showing low seismic activity as blue and high as red. Here is more green, and here's the default where low is practically non-existent and all the rest of it. You can also change the point radius, so if you want to have more detail, it helps when you zoom in and all the rest of it, or a broader look at things. I must admit, when I saw this on Monday, as Paul was demonstrating it, it really shows the tectonic plates around the world, and obviously where the seismic activity does happen and all the rest of it. Anyway, that's kind of interesting. We're also providing a new tile provider API, allows you to display custom tile images. I'm sure all of you know that the maps we're showing here are tiled. As I zoom in, and you probably can't see this in GoToWebinar, you can see the outline of the tile as it gets loaded. But basically, it's a way of providing tiles in your map as and when required from basically any source whatsoever. All you have to do is create a bitmap for each tile. So that's mapping. Let's go to the breadcrumb. So we've had this a little while now, the breadcrumb, especially for the file system. Oh, it's my file system. Let's jump into Windows. And I'm sure you've all seen this before. And the breadcrumb is appearing up here. So I was on C, I went to Windows, went to cursors. If I go back to C now, okay, fine, there we are. But what the new feature now is, we're logging your navigation history. So we can display this as part of the drop-down. So, I went to Windows, I went to Windows cursors. So we're seeing the breadcrumb history. Obviously, you can define how many items in this history you want to see, or the user wants to see, in the drop-down window. The pivot grid, way too many API and calculation capabilities are being added, probably too many to show off, and besides which they're not really visual. One big feature that we've added, which is actually part of the pivot grid core library, so it's available in WinForms and it's available in ASP.NET. So both Paul described that and Mihul and Don described it yesterday. So WinForms, ASP.NET. Best bet for you is to jump over to our documentation and look on the AGGR function, the AGRA function. So it's a new aggregate function. It's not available in legacy mode or legacy optimized mode. I'll have to talk to the documentation people. Do you want to make a note there, Paul? It uses summary function to calculate values for data obtained on the data source, and you can aggregate across specific set of dimensions, and you can nest them so you can have agras of agras. And please check it out. Great feature. And it's available for the optimized calculation engine. So if you are a pivot grid user, this may be the solution to some of your problems, shall we say. Next up is the rich text editor. What we have here is, so let me go to word processing RTF. Basically what's happening here is we've added support now for hyphenation, those soft hyphens that you're adding, and automatic hyphenation via a dictionary. And you can load, print, and export documents with soft hyphens. You can insert hyphens via the ribbon UI and so on and so forth. The unfortunate thing for us was when we released, we didn't have a dictionary with hyphenation specification within it. We've since discovered one, an open source one. So the next demo, if you like, in the next minor release, will have that dictionary. And so I'll be able to show that at some point in the future. But hyphenation, automatic hyphenation, providing you have the correct dictionary with hyphenation attributes, is now available. The one thing I do want to show here is the new track changes feature. So I can make revisions. Let's jump over to review here. I can click on track changes here. What I'm going to do is to show all markup. And let's say, okay, make an assumption that scheme and IPv4 are not in, oh, that should be definitely in config. If I could spell definitely, there we go, in conflict. So standard kind of track changes support. We're obviously logging the fact that these are being changed. We're showing you a special UI so that we can see what has been changed. And documents with these revisions can be printed and exported to PDF. So the new track changes feature. Next quickie is the rich text editors now support theme fonts. So if your theme has a couple of special fonts defined within it, we require headings and body, then by default the word processing control or the rich text editor will support those two fonts for the entire document. Obviously you can change those fonts as and when you wish, but it's just the default, if you like, when you have a theme. So that was the word processing part of things. Now let's jump over to the scheduler. First thing with the scheduler, we've added support for time regions. So let me jump to that particular demo. So basically what time regions are, is to allow you to select, or not select, highlight, I should say, certain ranges of time within the scheduler itself. They're not appointments. They're just, if you like, warnings that Saturdays around lunchtime, warning, warning, highlight, highlight, something, you know, don't put any appointments here, or that kind of feature. This time regions follow the same kind of recurrent settings as appointments do. So as we see here, Saturdays, you know, that time is not available, or whatever it happens to be. But they're also resource specific. So notice here we have a highlighted time region for the conference room, but the training room does not have that same highlighted region. This region here is across resources, and so on and so forth. So time regions, some way of visualizing visualizing to your user that don't put an appointment here, or you know, this is something else that you can't use, or whatever it happens to be. Added many new events, coding-wise, for editing appointments and resizing them, and so on and so forth. Many API enhancements. I would recommend you go take a quick look at the documentation about these events and see whether you can use them within your scheduling application. Next up is the spreadsheet. I can't spell spread. It's that kind of day. Spreadsheet. We've added support for the Excel binary workbook, which is the XLSB or BIF12 format, as well as the Excel 595/95 workbook, which is the BIF5 format. And I'm sad to say I actually recognize those names from somewhere in my past. I don't know why. But yeah, BIF12 or BIF5 format spreadsheet files will open quite nicely and be able to show the spreadsheet within the control. Next, the status bar. We've introduced a new status bar for a spreadsheet. We have the zoom feature here, so I can zoom in or zoom out of or the spreadsheet that's being edited. And nicely, which I never knew actually Excel did, but there we go. I was using an extra cell. But if I highlight a bunch of cells here, we'll also display within this status bar for the spreadsheet a few calculated values. So, you know, the average, the count. We'll even count the number of numbers inside that particular range. So if I select something where I don't have numeric values in these cells, there are 24 cells in this, but only 12 of them with numbers in them, and the minimum and maximum values and an average of those particular cells. So new status bar for the spreadsheet. As Paul pointed out to me on Monday, handy way of doing a quick calculation on a bunch of cells. As I would say, I used to go over here and type in sum, open parenthesis, the start of that, range down. Yeah, much easier to do that, I must say. While we're here, let's introduce the Office 2019 High Contrast theme. So let me jump over to Themes, jump over here, High Contrast, and there we go, the new High Contrast theme. As you see, it's very high contrast, black, white, high contrast colors and all the rest of it. If you like that kind of thing, or you need that kind of thing, yep, there it is. Works well. Let's jump back to the previous theme, and let me do my final little bit of demonstrations, which is the Windows UI part of things. Let me jump over to the Windows UI. What we're doing here is to try and mimic the fluent design that Microsoft are talking about with regard to Windows. Here we have a hamburger menu, and our hamburger menu now has this reveal highlight effect, basically designed to mimic the look and feel of Windows UI. So this kind of nice flashy highlight going on as I move my cursor over the hamburger menu. The reveal highlight as a CTP is available to templates that are used by any WPF control. So that's a CTP option. It's obviously not here yet, but it's certainly over here. And the other CTP option is the acrylic window. Let me just quickly show you that. This one is kind of hard. We had a discussion about whether this is even visible. So up here I have big blobs of color in this particular background. Let me show you my acrylic window calculator. And in theory, as I move over, can't even see whether it's visible within here, but you should be able to see. I can only just see it. There's a blue aspect here. There's an orange aspect here. Yeah, but you can see the reveal highlight part on this calculator, for example. Oh, anyway, so that basically is it for me talking about WPF. So I'd like to invite Paul back, and he's going to talk a little bit about Windows 10 UWP.
Yes, I am. Look at that. We're at this point already. Where did you go? So looking at the changes to Windows 10 UWP controls in version 19.2, first we're going to take a look at the data grid. And within the data grid, we'll skip forward one. Within the data grid, we've got conditional formatting. So we have full support, which allows you to change the appearance of individual cells and rows based on specific conditions. And also with the data grid, we have a synchronous row rendering. So effectively, you can enable the Allow Cascade Update option, which is going to improve the grid's performance, meaning that visible rows are only going to be loaded as they're needed one by one, and also on a background thread. And then the grid itself will provide a visual animation to show that something is happening during that process. Next, we've got the editors. Now, before I jump onto the time span particular feature, with the editors, we've got a new combo box and list view control, which support item grouping, multiple selections with checkboxes, and can also work with large data sources under the UI visualization. One of the things that was introduced in WinForms as well as some of the WPF is the time span and time span advancing caret masking. What you can see here with this example is the fact that we support the time span object, which of course is a standard .NET object type. And what's really nice is when your users are working with this particular control, the entire mask is how you set it up. So it could be a typical day, month, year. We can also do some custom formatting as well. Next, we have the support for NuGet packages. If you head over to nuget.devexpress.com, you're going to see this web page. And as we scroll down the web page, otherwise known as Julian advancing my slide deck, we can see all of the resources available to help you get up to speed with utilizing the NuGet feeds. What you do need to do, at this point you need to log in, but as you scroll down the page further, you're actually going to see your personal NuGet feed URL. Now obviously mine is obscured because it is my personal NuGet feed. I do want to just call out at the moment to the clause at the bottom there. Each of these feeds is unique to each developer on your account. So it is important that they don't get shared. It is part of your license agreements. But basically, you grab your NuGet feed and you put that into Visual Studio, and you can set up the automatic inclusion of your packages, and also useful for build systems and automation. Moving on from UWP, we will take a look at our Xamarin Form components. Now, because my notes are all over the place from the 300 webinars we're doing this week, I will just get to the right place. And with our Xamarin Forms, we've got updates to charts, we've got updates to the data grid, the navigation system, and scheduler. Now, these, I believe, are out of CTP now, Julian?
Yes, I believe so, yes.
I'm not seeing any CTP notes anyway. And of course, Xamarin Forms has come a long way, especially since the time that Microsoft acquired it. And one of the things that we've noticed and we've had to work through is obviously Xamarin Forms was a set of wrappers on top of existing controls. If you've worked with Xamarin at all in the past, the Forms component was great, but the problem was performance usually. So what the teams have done is pretty much built these controls as native controls to give us that performance. And some of the things I'm going to show you on Xamarin Forms actually apply to the native components that we also have. But today we're just going to focus on Xamarin Forms. As we step forward and look at the charts, we've got some new data adapters for both the Cartesian and pie charts. So there's a series data adapter, a pie series data adapter, and a calculated series data adapter. They basically support data collections implementing our binding list or the iNotify collection change, and allow you to bind iList, iList of T, and data table collections directly. You don't have to implement any custom data adapters. We've also added support for multiple axes. Now, we had this debate, axes, but axes. You can see from the image that's on screen where we've got different axes on the left and then on the right. And this provides much better visualization or improvements for comparative analysis on your charts. And again, we were discussing this, Julian, on mobile devices, you get some amazing looking charts that I think give some desktop components a run for their money.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's amazing if you look back over the years how far mobile has come, and being able to display charts like this is just amazing nowadays, I must admit.
Next, we've got performance enhancements, and with this, there's been some significant improvement. We're talking over 10 times. The new engine is 10 times faster than previous builds when doing large data processing. And this is across the whole of the charting library. Now, effectively, what we're saying is that the loading speed inside Xamarin Form chart control is almost equal to that of our native components. So that is pretty impressive. The example that we've got in the demos is, for example, loading more than 500,000 points without any significant UI delay. We've also got some miscellaneous enhancements. We've implemented 2 new options for Access to help you improve the layout of the data on your chart. So for example, you can now hide ranges that doesn't have any data from the date time axes, and you can also set up an axis to take up only a portion of the full length of the axis. So again, a couple of examples there. You can also choose the behavior of how a chart label looks. I've got 2 examples here. It's the same chart, just imagine it's been scrolled left to right, and you can nominate whether the label stays in a fixed position on the bar or whether the actual label moves along the bar itself. So again, given the fact that you've got less real estate to be working with, you've got more control over those visual elements and how they're going to actually apply. Next, we've got the data grid. With the data grid, well, this particular slide showing all of the functions across it, but with templating, for example, you can now use templates to extend how your grid elements look and feel in terms of your column header, the group row, group caption, group summary, the total summary, and your swipe option. We've got the full swipe action, and what that means, think in terms of, say, if your email client on your mobile, if you start to swipe, it usually exposes the options that are available, such as mark as read or delete or archive. We've now implemented that you continue to swipe, what's known as a full swipe action, and you can specify what action that's going to implement, either from the start swipe items or the end swipe items collection. We've got the validation, input validation, and error indication. So with this, think in terms of I suppose, comparing to a web page, when you're doing that data input and you get that validation message coming back, you can see on the image on the left that it's showing, hey, there's data missing, the from field is required, or validation on things like dates or numbers to make sure it's within an acceptable range. And then on the right-hand side, you can see that direct editing in the cell, we can also bring back an error indication saying, hey, something is not quite as we want. So you've got that power, the visualization power of the grid to provide that feedback to the user when something doesn't pass the test. Next, we've got the ability to use line breaks for data cells and column headers. So both the cells and the headers have full support for line breaks. And then in the we've got multi-line editing for text cells. So if you're actually working inside a cell, you've got full support now for actually being able to use multi-line editing in the display mode. We've also got custom group row heights, so you can specify the height of the property of group rows, and you've got the ability to turn on or off your the scroll bar visibility for both horizontal and vertical. Next, we have navigation. We've introduced a brand new tab page control. Again, if you're familiar with the different UI elements of an application, you can simply tap between the bottom elements and it will expose the relevant tab page for the selection that you've done. That's available through a collection of pages at the application's root level. And we've also introduced a new draw page. I really struggle with that word. Draw page control, and that's basically the page or the element that slides out from the edge of the page to expose navigation, or other options. And it's a very common thing to be used inside mobile development. So you can use it as your main navigation or a settings menu or similar. We've changed the scheduler view components. It now uses separate UI components for each scheduler view type, so a separate one for day view, week view, etc. And you can place a specific view on a page instead of the old component which used all view types. And the scheduler view obtains the data from the local or shared storage object. We've got access now to the Event Reminder API, where you can plug appointment reminders into either iOS or Android's alarm system using a reminders changed event, and also access the get next reminders method of the data storage object. And then finally, we've got support, and this is a cool one, especially when we're working across multiple time zones like we are, for time zone support. So when I jump in and add my webinar notification here, I can actually add it in and know that it's at 9 o'clock Julian's time and not having to work out what's going on because of the crazy time zones of the world.
You mean it's not 9, well, it's not, what, noon in your time zone? What?
Well, different parts of Australia. I think there's four time zones in Australia, but no, it's nearly 4 o'clock in the morning for me.
Okay.
The sun's almost up. You can specify a working time zone via the data storage time zone property, and that applies as a whole for the scheduler, or you can control the time zone settings for each appointment individually. And you can see from these screenshots here that would be as simple as editing an appointment, specifying the time zone, and then you can actually use the editor on the search feature to find the relevant time zone. It is amazing, Julian, how many time zones are across the world.
Well, it's 24. Yeah, just being mathematical about it, you know.
Yeah, one in every crowd. Now, that is all of the changes for the Xamarin Forms controls. As I said, they are out of CTP, and obviously we've been playing around with the Xamarin side of things for many, many years now. So it is good to know that it is still a very active part of our development.
And I can imagine that next major release will actually have a webinar just on Xamarin. I can foresee that happening.
That sounds actually be good to even do a webinar in between that and show off some cool Xamarin things.
Maybe.
Dobbing you in for that one, Julian. So, questions? Are there any that need answering?
I don't know. I haven't been looking at that particular panel. I'd just like to say thank you to everybody for attending and listening to what we have for WPF and for UWP and Xamarin. And obviously thank you to Paul. Now, what have we got?
So one of the really cool questions was regarding Rider. Now, for those that aren't aware, Rider is a third-party IDE by another company that a lot of developers are actually, well, say a number of developers are switching to. And so the question was, are our WPF controls supported in the Rider IDE? And the short answer is absolutely. But some of our IDE extensions are not supported. The controls themselves you can use. Can we have custom nodes in the diagram control? Absolutely. You can use shape definitions to create custom nodes. Do we have similar components for React/JavaScript? This again was the diagram control. And yes, we do have a preview or a CTP version of the diagram control. And register for tomorrow's webinar because the guys will be showing off React tomorrow, I believe.
Yep, indeed. Tomorrow is the DevExtreme, what's new in version 19.2. And as part of DevExtreme, we're going to be talking about React and Angular and JavaScripty things.
Tinus was really thankful for your machine not liking WPF for a minute, so he could go grab a beer, Julian. So that's always good.
Yeah, I think I will go grab a beer, actually. It's almost near o'clock in my time zone.
It's 10 o'clock somewhere in the world. Now, it was mentioned that some of the specific themes support the is read-only property for the text edit. Yes, they are the new themes. The older themes, such as the 2013, etc., do not support it. It is only the newer style themes.
Indeed.
Does the MVVM framework scaffolding work with .NET Core 3? Yes, all features except the application jump list service, and there are no wizards currently supported in Visual Studio. There's a couple of questions that aren't yet answered that the team will get back to us on, and we can follow up on those afterwards. Question here, do we have any plans to make a Visual Studio 2019 theme? And the response from the team, who thankfully are online and helping us with all this, they do an amazing job, is we are thinking about this hopefully in 2020. So
yeah, I mean, after all, Visual Studio 2019 has only just been released, so we've got to get our graphics designers in a room and tell them to, you know, make it.
Yeah. Final question, Julian, before we wrap it up is basically it appears that Microsoft's not aggressively pushing UWP. Are we still planning on improving our components? Short answer is absolutely. And would we shift our efforts to PWA such as Blazor? Well, of course, we do have an entire suite of controls for Blazor, and we've got teams dedicated for each of the core technologies that Microsoft or that are mainstream technologies. So it's not a matter of switching one on, one off. We continue to provide support for all of the active technologies.
Absolutely. And with regard to UWP, essentially, we require feedback from our customers to say, I'm using UWP rather than say, you know, WPF or whatever. So therefore, I really need, you know, extra features in that particular suite. UWP versus Blazor, I mean, Blazor is web. You know, no, well, maybe. Okay, moving on.
I think it is. But don't forget, if you're not yet registered, we have a number of other presentations this week. Version 19.2 is available in your downloads box right now. And thank you to Julian for doing most of the lifting on today's presentation.
And thank you for Paul for supporting me. And Amanda.
Yes. Are you ready for me?
We are.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. All right, everybody. Like I mentioned before, today's webinar will be made available later on our DevExpress YouTube channel, and I posted that link to everyone in the chat box. As Paul mentioned, we do have a couple more 19.2 launch webinars coming up this week. DevExtreme, reporting and dashboards, and Office File API. You can register for them at devexpress.com/webinars. And that is it for this one. Thank you so much to Julian and Paul. Thank you all for joining us. And of course, thank you for choosing DevExpress. Bye-bye.